Hi everyone. I first will say a couple of words about the organization I came from. We were set up in 2016 to develop partisan strategic litigation. And we're a tiny organization made up of 7 staff, and 2 of which are solicitors. We specialize in public law and action against public authorities. This means that our main aim is to take local authorities and central government to court for actions, for unlawful actions that they have taken. We tend to support campaigns, activists and frontline organizations, and we try and take a radical and creative use of the law and use that for social change. Our use of public law is really to try and bring it to people who wouldn't normally use it and to defend the rights of people. So tonight I'm going to talk about European homeless people and how did the Public Interest Law Centre come to work with this particular group is because over the years this is a group of homeless people that has been met with enforcement approach rather than a support framework. It's all been based around enforcement, and that's been at a London and at the national level. To a point where Bethan mentioned just before that the access to welfare benefits was becoming harder and harder. And it came to a point where local authorities, some homeless charities and the Home Office went around the streets arresting people and removing them en masse. And at that point, the Public Interest Law Centre took legal action on behalf of 3 homeless people. And we won this court case in December 2017 to stop these arrests and removals. On the back of this, we decided that we wanted to carry on doing this sort of I guess, like defending the rights of this group. So we carry on monitoring and supporting this particular group. I just want to give you a little bit of context, and it might well sort of link up with what Bethan has said before. In terms of immigration, EU or EEA nationals, so EEA nationals are all EU countries, the 27 countries, plus Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, and I think maybe Liechtenstein as well, can move freely across the borders and can also seek employment and reside, as long as they're not a burden on the social welfare system. And they're sort of the framework that govern the rights of people here is in sort of 3 trenches, should I say. The first one is that for the first 90 days of someone being here, there's absolutely no requirement other than having ID. Someone is free to come and go and do as they please. Beyond that initial 3 months, people need to exercise a treaty right, and that means either seeking employment, working, studying, or being economically self-sufficient. And that gives you certain rights and certain entitlements to which I will come back after. And then if you do exercise those treaty rights for 5 years or more, then you are entitled for something that is called permanent residence. And that permanent residence is something that would give you very similar rights to other people or other residents in the UK in terms of access to benefits, housing assistance, social housing, and that sort of things. This is true until, I guess, Brexit, dare I say, came along, and then things are still as they are. So the Free Movement Directive and the EU framework is still applicable today, and at least until Brexit Day. At the moment, Brexit Day is set for 31st of October, yet we actually have no idea whether that will happen or not. Initially, Brexit Day was meant to be the 31st of March. So in anticipation of the 31st of March, the government set up what they call the EU settlement scheme. The EU settlement scheme is a free scheme to grant the same group of people, all the EEA countries who reside in the UK and who come to the UK until the end of 2020. I will come back to that date after in the case of no deal. But say for now, if there was a deal and so on, that until the end of next year, people can come here and apply for this settlement. It's also open to family members of EEA nationals, and that scheme started fully on the 31st of March 2019, and it will be open for registration until June 2021. Bear with me for the dates. I will come and correct them in a moment. What is interesting about this scheme is, as opposed to the Free Movement Directive, which is very much based on the free movement of labor and is based on people working or seeking employment or being self-sufficient economically, this scheme is based on residence only. So for quite a lot of people you might come across who've not been able to work continuously for 5 years but may have lived here for 10, 15 years, that means they can apply and be granted a sort of equivalent to permanent residence, which is called settled status, which means that it entitles them to welfare benefits and housing assistance. So there is a definite benefit for a number of people through this scheme. It's also the case with a lot of people who you might come across who may still be working, but at a sort of very precarious end of the labor market, that they come in and out of work a lot, and it's difficult sometimes to also evidence. So again, in terms of claiming permanent residence in the old framework, it was quite difficult for them. This scheme is quite generous, shall I say, in terms of trying to register everyone who is in the UK right now to retain their rights and for some people to gain certain rights. The only real requirement is a valid ID. Perhaps I should even say that in some cases we can make applications for people without ID, but let's say that is really the starting point, that with a valid ID we can make an application. It is better if people have an I number, but it's not absolutely necessary. It is a fairly straightforward application. However, it needs to be done online, and so again, it's one of those applications that might be really easy for you and me to do, but for people on the streets might not be so simple, whether it's because of access to technology or gathering the evidence or having the money perhaps to get a new ID card or passport. There's a number of barriers, and the Home Office has made some funds available to voluntary sector organizations to support EEA nationals apply for that, and Praxis is one of them, and we are also actually in this partnership with Praxis and another number of organizations specifically set up to work with homeless people. So if you do have Europeans who you think that might help or who want to apply, then you should get in touch with us. It's also important to say that if people do not apply, say by the end of 2020 or the end of 2021, they might find themselves undocumented in the sense of what Bethan was talking about, people of the Windrush cases, which are people who may well have rights but have no way of documenting it, which means they're going to struggle to work, they're going to struggle to access free healthcare, they're going to struggle to access sort of welfare benefits, other type of assistance. Just a word on the no deal. If the UK leaves in 2 weeks' time without a deal, the main difference at the moment is that there will not be an implementation period, a kind of transition period. And this might mean that the end of free movement happens very quickly, with the introduction of a new immigration bill to replace Free Movement EU Directive, which is the first framework. All the people who've applied for settled status, all of that still applies, whether there's a deal or no deal. The only difference for the settlement scheme is that it will, the registration for settlement will end at the end of 2020 rather than June 2021. And also those who come in after Brexit, so those who come in after the 31st of October, will not be able to apply through this scheme. Yes, the only other thing I was going to say is that I believe there have been announcements made by the government about what this new immigration bill might entail and what European nationals will have to do when they do come to the UK. But I decided not to include it in here for now, just because I kind of want to work with what we know rather than what we don't know. The next slide is about the rights and entitlements after Brexit. So through the settlement scheme, two statuses are given. For those who have resided in the UK less than 5 years, they are granted pre-settled status. And this, for the sake of explaining it simply, they remain in the Free Movement Directive regime. So they are only entitled to welfare benefits and housing assistance if they are in employment, or if they're self-employed, or if they're a student. But they need jobs, for example, to be a job seeker is an excluded category, so they can't pretend to have benefits or housing assistance if they're only seeking employment. Yeah. The other category is if someone has lived here for 5 years or more, then they would be granted settled status, and that is that equivalent to permanent residence with full entitlements to welfare benefits and housing assistance. Yes, I wanted to make a point actually about public funds, and but I think Bethan sort of made that already. But often we hear that European nationals don't have recourse to public funds, and it's not strictly true. They may have recourse to public funds, but may not always have access to benefits, if that makes sense. So, I mean, Bethan said, explain about the habitual residency test. I just want to emphasize that if people are in work, then it's sort of, it gives them those entitlements. That's the key to the entitlements. In a similar way to what Bethan was talking about, in a way, immigration is often the key to those with no recourse to public fund or to those outside EU migrants. I think for EU migrants or for EEA migrants, the key is often employment, unless they reach the settled status of permanent residence. In addition to that, I thought it was important to remember that healthcare is free for EEA nationals. And also, I don't know if you're familiar with a form called HC1 form. We often forget about it, but it's a form that is very simple to fill in and that enables people on low income to have free access to prescription. And that's it. I'm going to stop here. I've given my two colleagues, Benjamin Morgan, who coordinates the Homeless Rights Project, and Kasia Makowska, who coordinates our settlement scheme project. And I've left their details, and you're welcome to pass them if people want to get in touch. Thank you.